Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Jody Grunden. Jody is a virtual CFO and financial strategist for growing agencies. He is the co-founder of Summit CPA Group, which is now part of Anders CPAs, where he's helped scale just hundreds of agencies with data-driven financial forecasting and CFO insights. Now, I wanted to have Jody on because too many agency owners fly blind with their finances and they miss out on stable, scalable growth. Also, we were tablemates at a conference last year, and he's a delightful human being. And when good people are also experts in their craft, I feel this urge to share them with our audience. Okay, so in this episode, we discuss building a 10% cash reserve for long-term stability, when to hire a controller or CFO as you scale, how to set pricing to maintain profit margins, and more. Lead gen is the hardest part of running an agency. For most, it's unpredictable, it's slow, and it's usually expensive. Gia flips that. It's the all-in-one growth platform that turns your existing relationships and client work into a steady pipeline. Gia automates lead gen, follow-up, and content, and it's all from the work you're already doing. You can check it out and get some free bonuses at getgia.ai/dynamic agency. And now, Jody Grunden. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. What is the number one financial mistake that agencies make early on?
Yeah, Chris, kind of funny you ask that because I would say the number one mistake is undercapitalizing. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of times they're told by their accountant that, hey, don't need to pay any taxes. So let's get rid of all of our money at the end of the year, pay down as much as we can, buy stuff, buy whatever that might be. And then we'll start the new year without having to have a big tax burden and kind of go on. And actually, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes a small agency can do, because the number one KPI that you want to have is your cash. And the number one KPI to determine that is how much taxes you're paying. So if you're paying a lot of taxes, and what I mean by that is not paying the amount over and above what you need to be paying. But if you're paying taxes, that's a sign that you're actually a healthy company. And so what we tell clients is we say that, hey, you want to build your cash reserve to be about 10% of your annualized revenue. So when you're starting out, if you're $300,000 in revenue, you should have about $30,000 in the bank at all times. You get to that $1 million mark, $100,000, and so forth and so on. And it's kind of simple. What does 10% actually mean? Well, if you do the behind the scenes math, it really comes up to about 2 to 6 months worth of expenses. And I say 10% for 2 months. 30% if you want to go the 6-month route, which is if you want more security, you want to make sure that you've got maybe multiple partners. There's a lot of different factors that would go into, hey, I need to have more money. Maybe you want to grow fast, but the key there is having that 10% at a minimum and build the 30% as you take on more risk. And that's right. What we tell, because what happens is they get into situations where they can't really make an informed decision anymore. They make a knee-jerk reaction because guess what? That client's delayed on their payment, and I got to decide really quick what to do. And a lot of times those decisions end up being the wrong decisions, where if they have that cash, they've got time to make that decision, make a really solid decision. You saw that probably in COVID, really. I mean, that was the biggest part when our clients went through COVID, through that year and a half, where that was so much uncertainty. Those that didn't have their cash reserve, a lot of them went out of business, or a lot of them really tons of stress. Those that had the cash reserve, they could kind of sit back. We can meet with them on a regular basis and model things for them, make the decisions. They meet with them the next week about decision making, and then make the right decision. And it just really impacted how they grew and basically their success.
Yeah, no, I think I can echo that. During COVID, like the agency I was with, we had a decent cash reserve, but like we depleted it through part of that. Yeah. And we ended up actually having probably our best year on record because of an offer that came from just necessity, right? Like we had to do something, and it worked out. But if we hadn't had that cash reserve, we would have been out of business before we could have even gotten to that plan.
Oh, absolutely.
And so yeah, I think it makes complete sense to have it. The other piece is, like, I've talked to a lot of agencies who they know what they need in their business, but then they don't have the money right now because they'd never had a cash reserve to be
Yep.
able to say like, yeah, I need a coach on this specifically to get me
Hmm.
through this problem. Um, and so like, yeah, I guess how do you even shift the mentality for agencies to be thinking like that? Because
Yeah.
most agencies are pretty reactive
Yeah, they're
to their
reactive
business.
and they don't know how to get it. I tell them 10%, and they're like, "Yeah, I wish," or "Yeah, but how am I going to look into that?" Well,
Mhm.
it's really it's just math, right? And on my first presentation that I ever gave for agencies, that's probably been 15, 20 years ago. Sat in front of about 30 owners, and we're like, I'm drawing. I can't do math in my head, which is kind of funny as an accountant. So I have somebody do the calculator as I'm doing the presentation, and then I did this easel board, and I just kind of walked out through, hey, what should one person fully optimize, generate in revenue? And it came out to about $200,000 if I remember right. And then I asked everybody, hey, if you could increase your sales price by $10, would you lose any clients? And no one dropped their hand. I just kept going up and up and up until I started seeing hands drop. And then I'm like, hey, even better, could you actually get $10 more in what you're selling? Being more efficient by that $10, because it's the same thing. Whether you increase the price or be
Right.
more efficient, same thing.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, absolutely. And so we did the math then for 30 people, just kind of giving an agency for 30 people, and it came out to like $3 million. And so it's like, well, how many people, 30, how many people have 30, 30 people? And if you raise their hand, are you at $3 million? No, we're not. Well, let's see what you could do. And so we said, hey, let's increase that price by 10%. And so or $10. And so we did the math again. And all of a sudden it came up to like $300,000, which was exactly what they needed for their cash
Mhm.
reserve. So it wasn't rocket science. It was more like, hey, are you pricing your
Right.
product properly? More than likely you're not. And that's what
Mhm.
happens to a lot of small agencies. They underprice because they're just not used to it. Those that overprice or
Yeah.
price to those they do really well. And they're like, wow, we're geniuses. Your genius is only because you priced it properly.
Right.
That's where it comes down to. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. Just that small tweak. Whether or not you're realizing that $10 per hour over your entire firm, or you're actually increasing it by $10. Just that $10 is a huge number. It's a small number, but a huge impact
Mhm.
on your financials, and it
Right.
allows you to get out of that mindset, because it's hard to get out of that mindset because you're on that roller coaster ride. And what I tell people all the time is that now that you've got the goal, now that you've got that, I need that $300,000 in the bank. And how am I going to get there? And so that's where that dynamic forecast comes into play. And so you want to create a dynamic forecast that you have control over, reviewing it on a consistent basis. And I say consistency is the key to it, because if you only review it when you need it, then you've lost control, you've lost sight. Whereas if you're reviewing it on a monthly basis at a minimum, and showing how did my actuals actually impact my future, it's amazing how quickly you can get to that goal, or how whereas before you're going flat, and now you've actually seen an increase on everything from revenue and profits and cash,
Mhm.
because now you've got that goal in mind. And it's no different than I always give the example with a map. If you live in Maine, Chris, you live in Maine here, and you want to come down to visit me in Florida, how are
Yes.
you going to
Right
get there?
now, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's really nice weather right now. So how are you going to get there? So you're just going to drive south. You don't need a map. You can drive south, but guess what?
Mhm.
You might take a wrong exit, and you might end up in Georgia, or you might end up in Texas, because Texas is south. But you'd eventually figure it out, right? Oh, Texas. Okay, so I
Mhm.
need to go east. I need to go east, and so then you follow it east, and finally you're in Florida, and then you go all the way around Florida, maybe, and now you're in Fort Lauderdale. So you figure out how to get to me. Whereas if you had a map, that's a little bit easier, because now you can kind of see streets. But
Yeah.
what's even better is when you have that GPS. That GPS is, and what it's doing, it's saying, hey, you've got a wreck up here. You've got, this, make this tour, let's get down there a little faster. And
Mhm.
so that's what that forecast allows you to do. It allows you to get it from A to B without having, maybe the straight line's not it. Maybe we got to zigzag a little bit to get there a little faster. And that's what
Right.
it does, because life isn't, it's not straight. You create this dynamic forecast. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to adjust it every
Mhm.
single month. That's why it's dynamic. Hey, you're going to realize, hey, I just landed this big client. How's that going to impact things? Oh, I need to hire. Or I lost a big client. How's that going to impact things? Maybe I need to tighten things up a little bit. And so that's where
Right.
the dynamic forecast comes in play. It's not a budget where you just throw numbers out there, in November, December, and for the whole year, and hope that you hit it. It's actually changes every single month. And so it's got to be super,
Mhm.
You got to have 100% control of it. And it's mostly the revenue and the cost of sales, revenue and employee expense are your main drivers up there. The rest, administration, marketing, those are pretty flat throughout most of it there. So that it makes it super easy to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, I think I could probably just hop on the I-95 and it'll probably take me to your house from here. So,
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, I feel like there's a stigma around finances, period. Because people just don't, it's like they don't have the financial literacy. Because even when I take a client who, says, hey, I want to just hit, 83K a month by the end of this year and stuff. We want to be $1 million agency. And when we map it out and stuff, it's like, okay, so you only need to close $1,000 of net new recurring revenue every month in order to hit this. Your smallest package is 5,000 a month. So like, we're actually going to move through this pretty quick. And they're like, oh, well, this is way more reasonable than I thought. And it's like, yeah, because we just looked at the numbers and like, I was able to show you. There's something, it's like, I don't know if it's because there's like a fear to that or because everything you just explained, like if I had those insights into like the, dynamic forecasting of my business, it's like now I don't need to worry as much. I know which metrics are and like which levers are going to move things the most. And I can just pay attention to those and then see how it pans out. So I guess that's like a multi-fold thing. But what metrics, I guess, are you most curious about within someone's forecasting?
The biggest one is that you never want to forecast against every other company out there, right? You want to forecast against yourself. You use every other company out there to kind of justify your forecast, meaning that if you've got a bottom line of 50% and everybody else has a bottom line of 25%, well, there's probably something wrong with my forecast. So let me dig into it and figure that out. That's where you're justifying against it, but right. You're using it against everything else. You're always looking at utilization, average bill rate. You're looking at the different things that impact your top line revenue there. You might look at your average dollar per producer. That should be about $200,000 per producer. Do you have that? Are you there? Is it close? Why not? Or why is it significantly higher? Which is also important to know because that means maybe you're pricing things right, or there's a lot of, or maybe you're using offshore staff or whatever that might be. But it's really important to understand what drives that revenue. So that's where the average bill rate comes in, utilization rates. If you're doing that, if you're doing a flat fee type thing or subscription based, then maybe it's your average client size, your average monthly client fee, how many clients you pick up, how many clients you lose, so client churn and client addition. Those might be different things. But then you always tie that back to your average employee cost. So you want to actually calculate that out and figure what that is, because like I had mentioned before, if you're charging $125 an hour, that might be plenty because maybe you're offshoring a lot of it, and maybe you're only paying $15, $20, $30 an hour, and the margin's there. But if you're paying stateside people a lot more money, that's definitely not going to be enough. Maybe you should be charging $250, $300, something of that nature. So you have to really know what that cost feature is and know what that margin is. And so I would say that you always want to have at least a 50% gross profit margin. That's what I've always driven our accounting firm by, 50% gross profit. And that's really consistent with any service-based company. So if you're, and the way you calculate that, your revenue minus your hard employee costs, which would be your salaries plus the burden. Burden meaning the insurance, the taxes, the 401k,25 that kind of stuff gets lumped into there. That should be about 50%. If you're there, your bottom line is going to easily work out to about a 25% gross profit or net profit margin. And that's where a really healthy agency is going to live, right at that 25%. If it's below 10%, it's really not churning enough to make cash. So you want to make it higher than 10%. That's kind of like your break even. And then anything above that's going to really help out. But you want to strive to have that bottom line at 25%. So I would say those are the key metrics that you would want to look at, both on the production side, and that's going to help you build that forecast, as well as the financial side, which is going to help you kind of mirror to other agencies to make sure that you're in the ballpark.
Yeah. Let me know if this is an off the wall question, but you just got me thinking about this piece. So we when I was running an agency, we had raised our rates. We were at about $300 an hour. We're using like a point system and stuff, and we're still selling set packages of 9K, 12K, or 18K. But as our cost per hour kept going up, it meant we could do less within a 9K package. which meant eventually, like I started noticing results were slipping across clients. And so we had to start actually doing some free work and like things like that to kind of make up for it. Do you have like any general rules of thumb for the pricing separate from just what makes like financial, like fiscal sense, as well as like looking at results?
Absolutely, because we've been doing flat fee or subscription-based billing really for 20 years, so a long time, and we've made tons of mistakes. Definitely tons of mistakes. We learned from them, but the biggest thing is that when you lock in fees like that, you've got to have annual increases. And so your $9,000 shouldn't be $9,000 next year. It shouldn't be $9,000 year after that. There should be an automatic increase, and you increase it based on what you're increasing your people's salaries. So if salaries go up 8%. Fees go up 8%. If salaries go up 5%, fees go up 5%. So the key there is letting clients know that in advance. And so you can't just spring it on them. And so what I mean by that is when we close a deal, we always tell clients, hey, here's your year one fee. It's going to be $1,500 a week for the next 52 weeks, and then it will increase between 2 to 5% or 2 to 10%. We tell them the typical is about 5%. And so then every year we follow that back up. It will increase that fee by that 5%, because you're right. Because once you lock yourself in, wages are going to automatically go up, and your margins are going to shrink, and you can't have that. You can't have that happen, and especially in a long-term contract. Especially like for our contracts, our clients stay with us about 4.5, 5 years, and so with that would really kill us if we locked everything in 5 years ago rates, and we're paying now, because the margins wouldn't be there. And so the key there is making sure that you let them know in advance. You just can't spring it on them. You got to let them know in advance that, hey, our fees go up annually, and give them a range, 2 to 10%. I always go 10%, just my high range. And it typically comes in between 5 to 6%. Outside of COVID years, that was a little different, but and that's what we actually explain that away by, hey, that's whatever we increase our employee fees by, or our employee salaries by, that's what we typically increase the prices by.
Yeah. So we had a similar policy set up. I think the issue was that we increased the cost per point or per given hour, but we never changed the buckets of value. So we would still say, so $9,000 when you're doing $200 a point versus $9,000 at $300 a point means you can fit fewer points in that 9,000. So we should have just upgraded those buckets to higher costs.
Yep.
But let's shift gears though.
We do something similar there, because instead of the buckets, we do it when we look at our capacity for our team. We look at by how much they can handle on a recurring basis. And so with that, maybe a CFO can handle 15 clients at a $1.8 million book of business. And so that's your big bucket right there. And so we do it based on revenue of the book of business. And that really works out well. And in the agency world, you can do the same thing. If you have recurring revenue, figure out what your team can actually manage, and then give them full credit for that, whatever that is. And so like one of our engagements, we might have a CFO on it. We might have a senior level accountant and maybe a tax person or something like that. So we may have 3 or 4 people, but everybody on that team gets the same top line bucket. And then we kind of back into what we actually need to pay those folks or incentivize those folks. And I think it's super key to do that, because if you don't, then you're going to get into issues there, and then you're going to get employee dissatisfaction, because now they're working harder for less opportunity. There's a lot of negatives that go into it. So you've got to make sure that you understand how you're incentivizing people, which is a completely different podcast for sure. With that, but you got to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So if you have your flat fee and you're going to increase employee wages, you've got to do something with the other side to equal it all out.
Right. So let's talk hiring a CFO. Whether fractional or full-time, is there a kind of a financial stage that you think agencies are probably ready to bring on someone?
Yeah, I think so. When an agent first starts out, absolutely not. The owner has to actually dig in and figure it out themselves. And I say that because they've got to figure out how their company actually works. The accounting side kind of sucks. You might have a bookkeeper to do paying the bills and doing some of that stuff. But to bring in somebody like a controller or a CFO is complete overkill. And so I would say, once we see that growth, and that growth is starting to really pick up around the $800,000 mark, and then you still don't need one, but you're starting to test yourself, and you're starting to actually fill different hats. I mean by hats, like now you might wear the production hat, the marketing hat, the sales hat, and all these other hats, right? And so you're starting to give those hats away at the $1 million mark, and at that point, that's when a good controller is important to have. And so and it doesn't have to be an in-person controller. It can be a virtual controller. Save some money on that. And what that person is doing is owning the financial statements and making sure that all the accounting is done properly, everything is done timely, and you're getting good information so that you can actually make solid decisions. And you're meeting with that controller probably once a month. If it's internal, you're meeting with them all the time, obviously. But I would say a virtual controller is a great one at that $1 million mark. When you start to get to the $2 million mark, well, actually, $1.5 to $2 million. That's when you start to see that a virtual CFO is really a big benefit, because at that point you're starting to build that leadership team, and you're giving away even more hats. And so now you've got to usually have a marketing director. You usually have a COO. You have all these different different hats into your leadership team, and that's where the CFO becomes a big part of that, because at that point now we're really diving into not only you've got the financials all wrapped up, because you got that controller, that CFO and the controller could be the same person, and so you've got maybe the virtual CFO there, and they're providing that insight where they can now you can look at that forecasting and the projections and the KPIs, and making sure that, hey, now we've got somebody helping us steer the ship forward. We got everything cleaned up in the back. Now we can look forward and really see if we can grow this, because what happens at that point, between that $2 to $5 million mark, that's the black hole stage, right? And we all know that's where it's really tough, because you start growing, but your profits don't, because these people that you're hiring in, they're pretty expensive people. And so you got to be able to manage that really well. And so, that's where the CFO is a really big part of helping you manage that, because you can manage yourself out of business if you have the wrong people in those spots. And you never want to do that, obviously. So that's why I say at that $2 million mark, definitely start looking for it. 3 million, absolutely. Anything more than 3 million, man. If you don't have a CFO in place or a virtual CFO, you're probably doing a lot of disservice to your company, and taking a lot of unnecessary risks that you'd be taking.
Right. Are there things that you have seen so as an agency owner starts, they should be doing, X, Y, and Z in order to kind of set the company up for success in the long run, where, hey, we don't have to redo your books and how you're managing your finances in order to kind of keep you growing? Are there best practices there?
Yeah, I'd say best practice, just having a solid bookkeeper, accountant in place, and with that, and that's early in the stage. That could be someone helping you out part time. It could be yourself doing it. But the thing there is you got to be consistent with it. It can't be that, oh, I've not done my books in 6 months, now let me catch up. That doesn't help you at all, because the financials and accounting is there to help you make those decisions. And so if you're not consistently looking at them, so I'd say get in the habit of consistently looking at your stuff, and that's every single week. You should be looking at your cash flow every single week. You should be looking at the next 13 weeks. You should have a nice Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, with basically lined up with starting cash, inflow, all inflows. That would be revenue, anything that's coming in, any outflows, that's debt that's going out, as well as any expenses. At the bottom line, showing your ending cash, and then rinse and repeat the next week. Next week starts at the beginning, and so forth. And it should go through for 13 weeks and really kind of see, hey, what do we expect to come in? What's coming in here, and then what do we expect going out? Do we have our loan payments coming out? Do we have any kind of distributions that we're going to make? Because what happens is if we get into that really good habit of really managing cash flow, it's amazing. When you bring in somebody at a higher level, how they can now take that 13-week cash flow and blow it out to 3 years, or blow it out to 5 years, or, hey, what's the end story going to look like? Let's see if we can build our company to that $10 million company with that $2.5 million bottom line. That's the key there. And so I would say consistently building out that cash flow, but getting somebody in fairly quickly to really kind of make sure you've got somebody that understands the accounting, understands the books, and can manage that for you.
Makes sense. So let's talk about risk. How do you because a lot of our finances really is what lets us accept more risk within our business, right? If we got that cash reserve, we can do some things we might not do if we're still trying to keep the lights on. How are you kind of evaluating investments and different decisions when it comes to growth and just the amount of risk you're willing to accept?
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors that go into that. So it could be your timeline. Timeline meaning, how long you're going to be working in this business, and what dollar amount you want to get it to. So if the narrower that number is, the less risk you're going to take. The wider that is, the more risk you can take. So that's a big thing. If you have multiple partners, that's a big thing too. If you've got one partner, less risk. Multiple partners, more risk. And you think, what do you mean more risk? And it's like, well, because now you got four people making different decisions. You've got to be able to work together, which could be a fatal mistake, and it could, eventually tank your company. So, you've got to make sure that everybody's on the same track there. If you've got accounts receivable, big risk. If you've got recurring revenue, it's automatically taken out with no accounts receivable, less risk. And so the risk factor is the big thing there. And if your receivables are giant, let's say, and what I mean by that is, let's say you've got a significant amount of revenue coming from one client. And one client could mean, it could be like MSN, it could be like the NBC network or whatever. And you've got MSNBC, that's one client. Even though you got multiple divisions, you still have one client. Mm-hmm. You could easily lose all of those, with somebody coming in and making some changes. And so you have to be careful with that. And that's happened to many people where they say, "Oh yeah, we don't have anything to worry about," and all of a sudden, they're letting go half their workforce because because somebody else came in and the new sheriff came in town type of thing, and everybody changed roles and so forth. So the risk factors like that are important to understand what they are. And I'm not saying don't have risk like that, because that's silly, but just understand that it is risk, and understand you've got to have that contingency put in place, if things happen. And so what I recommend is taking all the different risk factors that you might have, number, everything like that. And it could be, let's just make the number of partners. And so we'll say, hey, we've got number of partners. That's just my one column, my risk factor there. And so what happens if one of my partners leave today? And all your partners are together making this decision. So, hey, if one of those people leave, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to just go ahead and do this. And so we map it out. What if three partners leave? Well, here's what's going to happen. We'll map it out and pay it. And so then what happens is 5 years down the road, one partner leaves. It's not like emotional because, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person's leaving. Why is she, she was the best person in the world. Now what are we going to do? It's like, well, you already mapped it out. Unemotional, we mapped it out. Here's what we all agreed on. Boom, we're doing it. And it just takes that emotion out, and it takes that risk, which is a risky thing, having multiple partners, and it lowers that risk. It doesn't remove it, but it lowers it. Yeah. The same thing with cash. Hey, if I've got more than 10% of my money in cash in the bank, that's a risk because you're not really earning any money on that money. But it's also security, right? So it's making sure that you've got enough money to make those decisions. So what do we do with that extra money? Well, anything over and above that, maybe we sweep that to an investment account that has maybe it's a high interest savings account where it's getting 4% on your money. Hey, that's a low risk, but that's also it's put into an account that you can actually get to it without actually breaking everything down to get to it. Or maybe you take that, and anything over maybe 15%, we move into a Schwab account that's has some, mutual funds or something really, bonds or a low risk thing where you can actually pull it out. Might take a couple days to get it out. You're not penalized by it, but it's actually earning money for you. And so that's taking that risk, having too much money in your cash to, spreading it out and actually earning some money off that money, but not putting it into something like, like stocks or something like that you're actually going to going to get clobbered accidentally for if the stock market drops. And now stock market drops and you lose a big client at the same time. Now what do I do? I amplified my risk. And so I want to make sure that, hey, you look at the different areas there. Those are all buckets, all columns, all the risk factors. And what happens if these things happen? It's basically like a DEFCON chart, that, hey, if one happens, what do we do? If two happens, what do we do? Three happens and so forth. But you map it out as a leadership team ahead of time. So there's no emotion when it does happen.
Right. Man, that was it felt almost like a rant with like you've had this before where you're like, man, I wish people would do this. Great information though.
I wish I've learned a lot of this just because I made all these mistakes. It's like heck, 20 some years in business. nothing's
Yeah.
perfect. Now, you grow from $0 to, right now we'll probably do about 16, $17 million in revenue. You make mistakes along the way. This doesn't happen. There's been years we've had high growth and no profit. What do we do? What did we do? It's like, what did we
Yeah.
do wrong? Well, we relied on emotion a lot of times, and that caused some, bad decisions. So we had to figure out how can we take this emotion out? Because, my partner's non-emotional. I'm high emotion. So how does that work? That's a big dynamic that we got to figure out.
Right.
And so all those things come into play. And so it's important to figure it out when it's not happening, and then deal with it when it does. No different than when you get a line of credit. You get a line of credit when you're doing really well, not when the house is burning down, because you won't get it when that happens. So you get it now, you set it for a couple of years, and that gives you that opportunity so that when you do need it, it's there and available. It doesn't mean you have to use it. It just means that it's there. It's that insurance policy for you.
Right. Well, and just that ability to prepare for making decisions. Poker players are good at this. Actually, the stock market really good at this. Where if they make a bad decision, but if they went back through and like with the data that I had, I would make the same decision. Then like you can't beat yourself up afterwards.
No.
Like I've met so many agency owners like it's months after something went wrong, and they're like, "Yeah, I should have done this, should have done that." It's like, yeah, but if you had prepared for this and said like, "Hey, if this type of situation comes up, here's my process for deciding." Like it makes it a lot easier to, even if it's just to stomach it. Like you might still make the same mistake, but then you can at least tweak your process. Not
You can't beat yourself up for making mistakes because you're going to. I mean, it's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be some big mistakes. You have big mistakes in there, and that's just part of an entrepreneur. That's a part of a business owner.
Yep.
Business owners should be willing to make those mistakes in order to learn from them to grow the company.
Cheers. I mean, even the small stuff. So like last year, I still ran on a cash basis.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, I need to get into accrual account. Like I'm making enough that I need to use accrual accounting here. And it was just a pain all year. And so like this year I'm set, but I didn't listen to myself in tax preparation from last year. And so this year I'm still like going to find certain documents and doing all this stuff. And it's like, just learn the lesson. Like, but again, it's the finance piece. And so like, I like seeing the numbers go up. I don't like doing anything else with it. Let me spend it, earn it, spend it. And that's about it.
Yeah. You take those big distributions out of the back. That's kind of that's not the entrepreneur way for the most people.
Yep.
For us.
That is it.
Yeah. With us, what's key. We did the distributions and did all that negative stuff that you take out and you zap stuff out. But then once we had that 10% rule, man, it changed. It was like, hey, yeah, we have $1 million sitting in the bank. That was pretty cool. $1 million sitting in the bank, and then we would take out almost $1 million each at one point. I was like, that's cool, and it was not a big deal. That was a normal thing. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to kill the company. No, that was normal. Maybe take a salary of $500,000 at that point or whatever, and you're like, this is kind of cool. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because you got that security in there, and you got less risk.
Yeah. Yeah, just the confidence. I think all entrepreneurs somewhere are feeling like, what if this all just goes away tomorrow? But when you got that cash in the bank, like it could go away tomorrow, and I have a plan. And so,
exactly. Yep, we're on the same page.
Yeah. So as we wind down here, I got two more questions for you. The first one being, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
Yeah, so books. I would say selfishly, Digital Dollars and Cents is a book that I wrote that really kind of talks about all the metrics, and it really kind of breaks down what an agency is. You can get it right on Amazon. Highly recommend that. That's kind of a selfish thing. How I started my company, though, and I would say the reason why my company has grown the way it has is developing solid processes that are repeatable. Meaning that when I started the company, I couldn't be I couldn't be snowflakey on providing CFO services. I had to be able to put it into processes so that Adam, my partner, could eventually become that person. And then Jake, my next partner, could eventually become that person. It had to be a repeatable process. And I got that through E-Myth Revisited. It's a book that I've read over and over again. Great book. And a lot of great stories in it. And McDonald's is a big one there. You think about that. That's a repeatable process, right? Put a McDonald's up, you're going to get the same hamburger no matter where. That type of thing. You're going to get the same shakes that always break down. It's the same repeatable process though, and that's really key to really growing any company, is having something repeatable, so you as a business owner can actually move out of the business and it not impact anything in the business. And that's when I say, when you become worthless to the business, you're the most valuable to the business. And that's really key. And that's what kind of the E-Myth is all about, talking about that. And then we kind of take it one step further with digital dollars and cents and kind of work through that. And if anybody wants a copy of that, you don't have to go out on Amazon and buy it. Just let me know and I'll be happy to share it with you. That's not a big deal.
Awesome. I think I got my signed copy. It's still upstairs. So
there you
go. Last question is, where can people find you?
Oh, it's easy to find me. I'm on Google, I'm on YouTube, anywhere in there. We give away a lot of information for free. We want to get that information out there to really help everybody and grow. And we put a lot of videos, a lot of workshops on YouTube. So you can definitely reach out there. Just Google my name, Jody Grunden. If you want to reach out to me directly, feel free. It's J Grunden, Grunden at AndersCPA.com. So it's ANDERS CPA.com. That is my email address. Feel free to email me. I'd be happy to do a 1-hour consultation with you to answer any questions, help maybe, and it doesn't have to be anything related to a sales type thing. It can be anything you want. Hey, what are you seeing in business? It could be just a chat. I'm super cool with that. I'd be happy to sit down. As you know, Chris, we've chatted many times. So, yeah. It's, not a big deal. I'm an open book when it comes to that information. So feel free to take advantage of that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get that linked up in the show notes as well. So, but awesome. Jody, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. This has been pretty fun.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.